Hey, what's up guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. I just wanted to do another video here today on modes. I have a ton of video on modes. My most recent one is called Modes 101, Everything You Need to Know About Modes. It's here on the YouTube channel if you want to check that one out. I'll put a link to that below. I just wanted to make this video here today as another way to try and help people to, make this whole concept of modes click for them. A lot of people still struggle with understanding or wrapping their head around this concept of modes. Essentially what a mode of the major scale is, it's just another perspective of a key. So like the first perspective of the key of E major is the Ionian mode. The second perspective of the key of D major is the Dorian mode, E Dorian. The third perspective of the key of C major is E Phrygian, or the E Phrygian mode. So we're going to look at all types of E modes. We're going to look at E Ionian. We're going to look at E Dorian, E Phrygian, E Lydian, E Mixolydian, and E Aeolian. So when you compare the different modes of the major scale together in this manner, where each mode has the same root note, in this case it's going to be E the entire time, this is known as parallel modes. So in my opinion, the best way to hear the difference between modes, to hear what the Ionian mode sounds like versus the Dorian mode versus the Phrygian mode, and so on, the best way to hear the modes, because after all, that's what modes are, they're sounds, is to compare them in parallel. So normally in order to do this, you would want to have some sort of a backing track to practice over. You want to have like an E note just kind of ringing out, and then you can play the E Ionian scale over that E drone note backing track so you can hear what the E Ionian mode sounds like. And then over that same E note just ringing out, you would play the E Dorian scale. That way you can hear what E Dorian sounds like. And then you do the same thing with E Phrygian, E Lydian, and so on. But you can also do this without a backing track. You can just use your guitar. If you have a 6-string guitar that's in standard tuning, your lowest note is going to be the note E. So we're going to use that as the drone note. So in order to do this, you're going to need to know three things. Number one, you're going to need to know the order of the major scale modes, and then you're going to need to know the number that's associated with each one. So Ionian is 1, Dorian is 2, Phrygian 3, Lydian 4, Mixolydian 5, Aeolian 6, and we're not going to do Locrian in this video, but Locrian would be 7. So we're just going to focus on the first 6 of the major scale modes. The second thing you're going to need to know is which modes are major and which modes are minor. So your first, 4th, and 5th modes are going to be your major modes, and your 2nd, 3rd, and 6th are going to be your minor modes. So if you wanted to practice over a backing track, in which case we're not doing that here in this video, we're just using the E string. But if you wanted to practice over a backing track, if you wanted to hear the sound of Ionian, Lydian, or Mixolydian, you would want to play it over either a single note or a major chord. So if you wanted to practice E Lydian, for example, you would want to play it over an E major chord, not an E minor chord. But then for the other modes, the Dorian, Phrygian, and Aeolian, you would want to play it over a minor chord. So if you wanted to practice E Dorian, for example, you would want to play it either over just an E drone note or over an E minor chord, because those are minor modes. And then the third thing you want to know is this pattern right here. You actually want to be able to play this across all 6 strings. If you're going to play it across all 6 strings, it's like this. But the reason I'm giving you this pattern is because you can use this. You can just use the first 7 notes of it, or actually just the first 6 notes of it, because we're just going to be looking at the first 6 modes here today, to assign your numbers to. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. But we're just focused on the first 6. So that's the pattern. All right, so those are the 3 things you need to know. Let's look at how you can now practice the different modes that have E as their root. All right, so mode number 1, the Ionian mode. This is a major mode, so you can either play it over just an E drone note, or you can play it over an E major chord. So the idea is to just kind of noodle around in that scale pattern that I just showed you. So that's the sound of the Ionian mode. Now we're going to listen to the sound of the Dorian mode. The way that you do this is you take that pattern that I just showed you, and you have to move it such that the note E is now the second note instead of the first note. Before it was the first note, now you have to make it the second note. In order to do that, you're going to have to move this pattern a little bit. There's that pattern. This is actually the D major scale. What this tells you is that E Dorian is the second perspective of the key of D major. So that's your pattern. But when you play that over an E, just an E note, or an E minor chord, because remember the second and third and sixth modes are going to be your minor modes. So play it either over this or over this. It's going to give you the sound of E Dorian. And notice how I'm trying to like time my runs, or not time my runs, but try and whatever, my noodling, I'm trying to like end my noodling phrases on the note E. So instead of going, which would be ending on the note D, I'm going, I'm ending it on that note E there. Because that's now your tonal center. We're just playing the D major scale. That's all we're doing. We're playing the D major scale, but we're playing it over an E minor chord. All right? It's the second perspective of the key of D major. Anyway, so let's move on to Phrygian now. Phrygian is 3. That's played over a minor chord. Your second, third, and sixth modes are going to be your minor modes. So, or just, all right? Now we have to move that pattern again so that E is the third note. So here's E. All right, so that's the C major scale. So that tells you that the E Phrygian mode is the third perspective, or the third mode of the key of C major. So play that scale pattern. There's the E right there. It doesn't sound like the major scale at all because we're playing it over an E minor chord. That's the sound of Phrygian that you're hearing. All right, so now we're going to move on to mode number 4, which is Lydian. So Lydian is one of the major modes. Your first, fourth, and fifth are going to be your major modes. So Lydian is one of the major modes, so you can play that either over just an E drone note or over an E major chord. So we have to move this pattern around such that the note E is the fourth note. All right, so how do we do that? So here's an E up here. This time we're going to put the E on the A string. So to make that be your fourth note, all right, so that's the B major scale. All right, so this tells you that the E Lydian mode is the fourth mode, or the fourth perspective of the key of B major. All right, so we're just going to play that scale pattern, but we're going to make that be our tonal center. We're going to make E be our tonal center. So. All right, that's the sound of Lydian. Let's do Mixolydian now. So you have to make E fall on 5. So we're going to use that same E again right there, 7th fret of the A string. Move this pattern around until E becomes the 5th note. So. All right, so that's the A major scale. E Mixolydian is the 5th mode of the key of A major. So same thing. This is one of the major modes again. So play it over an E major chord. Alright, so that's the sound of Mixolydian. And then finally we're just going to do Aeolian. So Aeolian is 6, so make the note E be your 6th note of that pattern. Here it is. All right, so this would be. All right, so that's the G major scale. So that tells you that E Aeolian is the 6th mode of the key of G major. So again, this is one of your minor modes, so play it either over an E drone note or over an E minor chord. Noodle around. Alright, so that's the sound of the E Aeolian mode. Aeolian being the 6th mode, E Aeolian being the 6th mode of the G major scale, or the key of G major. That's that. Alright, so hopefully this video is helpful to some people that may be having trouble wrapping their heads around this whole idea of modes. I tried to keep as many things the same in all examples so you can kind of hear the difference. So we had the root note E in all cases, and we used the exact same pattern in all cases. We just shifted the pattern around to suit the key that we were playing in. The first perspective of the key signature of E major, E Ionian. The second perspective of the key signature of D major, E Dorian. Third perspective of the key signature of C major, E Phrygian. All right, and so on and so forth. So that's that. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask. Thanks for watching.